Um, so, الطهارة, as I mentioned, linguistically it is النظافة, cleanliness. And in the شرعي sense, in the religious sense, it is ارتفاع الحدث وزوال النجس or نجس بماء طهور. It is to remove the state of al-hadath, the state of impurity from oneself, and it's also to remove najasat, impure substances from oneself or from their clothes and so on. Using ma tahur, using water which is tahur, meaning it has the ability to remove impurities. As we will mention now, water is three types. So the definition of al-hadath, it says to remove the state of al-hadath, impurity. It is defined as وصف قائم ببدل الإنسان يمنع الصلاة ونحوها. It is a state in the body of a person which prevents them from salah, prayer, and from things which are similar to it, such as, for example, tawaf and etc. So al-hadath is two types, of course: al-hadath al-akbar and al-hadath al-asghar, major impurity and minor impurity. Al-hadath al-asghar is removed through wudu, and al-hadath al-akbar is removed through al-ghusl, and inshallah they'll be mentioned further down in more detail. So in general, we can say that al-tahara, it has 6 types. So that was the definition, ijmalan. In the generic sense, it is removing the state of al-hadith and also removing al-najasa. But يعني in the tafsil, if we were to divide further down, then it's 6 types. There is irtifa al-hadith, removing hadith, as was mentioned, and then there's also irtifa ma fi ma'na al-hadith, to remove something which is similar to al-hadith, in that it prevents you from salah, but the way that it's removed is not through wudu. Such as, for example, as will be mentioned further down when it comes to this section of wudu, غسل اليدين لقائم النوم. The person, the Hanbali madhab, when they wake up after sleeping in the night, they have to wash their hands 3 times before they can do wudu. So this is something which isn't technically irtifa al-hadith, but it's similar to it. Likewise, for example, tajdid al-wudu, to make wudu a second time. Here you're not removing al-hadith, but this is في معنى ارتفاع الحدث. It's similar to it because it's the same process, though you're already in a state of tahara, but it's still considered to be a form of tahara. And likewise, removing al-najasa, it can also be removing al-najasa tariya, and it can also be removing something which is impure in its essence, izalatu ayn al-najasa, and there can be removing something which is not impure in its essence, rather impurity fell upon it. So the first one, which is removing something which is najisul ayn, impure within itself, is, for example, when khamr, when alcohol is turned into vinegar, al-khal. Here it's no longer impure, of course, with certain conditions which we mentioned later. That's a form of tahara. Likewise, similar to it is removing something which is najis tari. It's not impure within itself, but impurity has befallen upon it, such as cleaning your clothes. If feces or blood or any other najasa was to be on your clothes are tahirul ayn. They are inherently something which is tahir, pure, but there is najasa which has befall upon it. Tala alayhi al-najasa. This is also a form of tahara. So those are the aqsam and the tafsir. But each one will be mentioned, inshallah, in its own section. So after that, it says al-miyah thalatha, waters of 3 types. The reason being that water, it can either be najis or tahir, like any other thing. All a'yan, all items, things, they are either something which is tahirul ayn or najisul ayn, something which is pure within itself or impure within itself. Like, for example, al-khamr, it's something which is impure within itself. Al-bawl, urine, is something which is impure within itself. Badul al-adami, human body within itself, is something which is pure. For example, a piece of paper, if it's made from substances which are pure, it's also pure. So water like that can also be something which is pure, tahir, or something which is najis. Then the one which is pure, it could either have the ability to remove najasat from other things, or it might not have that wasf. So therefore, that gives us the third category, water which is طاهر في نفسه مطهر لغيره. The first type would be water which is within itself pure and it can be used for purification. The second type is طاهر في نفسه غير مطهر لغيره, water which is pure within itself but it cannot be used for purification. Sorry, earlier I only mentioned four. I'll mention the other two inshallah in a second. And the third type, it is water which is najisun, which is impure. So therefore, water is three types. As for the six types of tahara, they are ارتفاع الحدث and ما في معنى ارتفاع الحدث or ارتفاع ما في معنى الحدث. That's the second. The third is ارتفاع حكم الحدث. ارتفاع حكم الحدث. What that is for example, a person who has salasul bawl or a woman who has istihada, yani a state in which najasa consistently comes out of the body. Here they would make wudu and then they would pray in their state, even though technically they have not removed that hadith, but they still are allowed to act as if the hadith has been removed. Likewise, for example, tayammum, according to the method, tayammum is mubihun غير رافع. Tayammum doesn't remove hadith, but it makes it permissible for you to pray and do the other ibadat. So that's the third type. The fourth type, I said, إزالة عين النجاسة, such as khamr becoming khal, such as alcohol becoming vinegar. And إزالة النجس الطارئ, not طالع, طا ألف را hamza. That's the fifth type. And the sixth one is زوال حكم النجاسة وإزالة حكم النجاسة. For najasa's hukm to be removed, meaning it's treated as if it's not najis, even though it is. That's like, for example, al-istijmar, doing istinja using pebbles or using tissues and things like that. It doesn't necessarily clean the mahal in entirety, but it removes the ruling of the najas. So those are the six types of tahar. So now it says here, al-miyahu thalatha, water is three types, and I explained why that is. The first is tahurun. The first type of water, it is tahur, which means it is al-baqi ala khilqatihi, water in its natural state. Water in its natural state is tahur, meaning it is tahirun fi nafsi mutahirun li ghayrihi. It is something which is pure within itself and purifies other things. It says كماء الأمطار, such as water from rain, rainwater that is in its natural state. Likewise, مياه al-anhar, water from rivers, wal-abar, water from wells, wal-uyun, from springs. All of these waters are in the default state, they are tahur. They are both pure in themselves and purifying for others. It says يرفع الحدث ويزيل نجس الطارئ. This water, which is tahur in its natural state, it can be used for يرفع الحدث. It removes الحدث. الحدث الأكبر من الحدث الأصغر, because it's used in wudu and it's used in الغسل. ويزيل النجس الطارئ, and likewise it removes najasa which is طارئة, meaning something which isn't inherently impure, but impurity fell upon it. Like, for example, your clothes. If something impure was to fall upon it, you can use water to remove that najasa, and then it would return to being tahir. So that is the use of water. As for something which is najisul ayn, which is impure within itself, then water cannot remove its impurity. So, for example, blood is something which is inherently impure. No matter how much water you add to it, that's not going to change the ruling of it being impure. Of course, there are cases where something which is impure can become pure. There's actually three cases in the method, which we'll mention later on. But that's not done by water, such as, for example, alcohol becoming vinegar. If it occurs naturally without adding additives, then that becomes tahir, but it's not due to the use of water. Water does not contribute to it becoming tahir. So water is only used for removing a najasa of tariya, najasa which isn't something inherently impure, rather it's something which is pure but impurity fell upon it. And it says ويجوز استعماله مطلقا. And water which is in its natural state, al-ma al-tahur, it can be used unrestrictedly, meaning it can be used for tahara, as you mentioned. It can be also used for drinking. It can also be bought and sold and used for any other permissible use. So that's what it means. يجوز استعماله مطلقا. That was the first type. Now, here in the method, the Shaykh doesn't go into detail regarding al-ma al-tahur and its different types. But this water, which is pure within itself and purifying for other things, it is it can have different rulings. It can be mubah, permissible, and it can also be makruh, disliked, and it can also be muharram, impermissible to use. So mubah, that's the original case that it's permissible to use. And there's other tafasil which I mentioned, for example, al-mutaghayyir fi mahal al-taqrir and other than that, but those are going to be, inshallah, mentioned in higher level books. The second type is water which is makruh, which is disliked. There are examples given in the madhab for it, roughly around 9 types of water which are tahur, meaning you can use them for wudu, you can use them for ghusl, you can use them to wash in najasat, but using it is disliked, such as, for example, water mashtadda harruhu aw baraduhu, or barduhu, water which is very cold or very hot. Using it for wudu and ghusl is disliked. Likewise, for example, water which is mustakhan bin najis, water which was heated up using impurities. Not that the impurity fell in the water, rather, the water is separate to the impurities, but you heat it up using impure items. Basically, you burn something najis, and then through that heat, you heated up the water, which is tahur. Here, this makes the water makruh, disliked to use. And there are other cases, well, which I won't mention all of them, since that would be for higher level books. Also, one of the examples is, for example, using ma'u zamzam li izalat najasa, using zamzam water for removing impurities. That's disliked, makruh. As for using it for wudu and ghusl, that's permissible. And as for al-ma al-muharram, water which is haram to use, even though it's within itself purifying, but it's not permissible for you specifically to use it, such as al-ma al-maghsub, water which has been stolen. Here, you cannot use it for wudu, nor for ghusl, nor for anything, because you don't own it. Likewise, water um, uh, which is mushtara bi thamanin mu'ayyan muharram, water which is bought using money which is impermissible. If you have, let's say, I earned $100 from some haram exchange. I sold, for example, alcohol. This money specifically is haram for me. If I were to use this money to buy water, using that water would also be haram. If I was to use that water in wudu or ghusl, the tahara would be invalid, meaning I would still be in a state of hadith. I can't pray with water which was, I can't pray if I used water which was maghsoob, stolen, or bought with haram wealth. I cannot use that water for wudu, therefore my wudu will be invalid. Likewise, there's a third example which is mentioned a lot in the books of the method. It is ماء يسير خلت به امرأة لطهارة كاملة عن حدث. It is water which is left off from the usage of a female. If a female was to use water for a tahara, for wudu or ghusl, and then there was to be a remaining amount left in the container, if the woman used it in a state of al-khalwa, being alone, it's not permissible for a man to then use that water to make wudu or to make ghusl. Because the Prophet said, نهى عن طهارة الرجل من فضل امرأة وطهارة امرأة من فضل الرجل. I think the riwayah only mentions طهارة رجل من فضل امرأة, for a woman to have used some water and then the remaining water needs to be used by a man. That is not permissible, and it does not remove one's state of hadith. There's conditions for that, 7 conditions, which I mentioned in books of the method in more detail. But here we're just going to be mentioning some of the masail briefly. So basically, water which is tahur can be used for ghusl and wudu, and for removing impurities, and it can also be drank, and it can also be used for as-siqaya, for example, watering plants and things like that, unless the water is muharram. If the water is impermissible for you specifically to use it, then here, even though it is the water which is tahur, you're not allowed to use it, and if you do use it, uh, it does not remove your state of impurity. It does not make you enter into a state of tahara. So wudu done with water which is stolen, or bought with haram wealth, or مما خلت به امرأة لطهارة كاملة حدث. In all of these cases, the person's wudu is invalid. That was the first type of water, الماء الطهور. The second type of water is والطاهر. لا يرفع الحدث ولا يزيل النجس. It is water which is pure within itself, but it cannot be used for removing impurities or for removing al-hadath. Meaning you can't use it for wudu, you can't use it for ghusl, you can't use it for istinja, you can't use it for example, washing one's hands after sleeping. Yani as it will be mentioned in the method, you have to wash your hands 3 times before doing wudu if you slept after sleeping the night. All of these things, you cannot use this water for it. But you can use it for drinking, you can use it for example, farming, watering plants. So it's permissible to use, but it cannot be used for رفع الحدث, nor can it be used for إزالة النجاسة. Likewise, if your clothes have some impurities on it, you can't wash off those impurities using this water. If you do, the ruling of the impurity still remains. Even if the actual impure substance has been removed, the ruling still remains. You would still have to wash it a second time using water which is tahur. So that's why it says لا يرفع الحدث ولا يزيل النجس. And the example is كالقليل الذي رفع به حدث, like الماء المستعمل. That is water which has previously been used for purification. It says here al-qalil, water which is a small amount. We'll explain inshallah what is a small amount, what is a large amount in a moment. If a small amount of water was used for a form of tahara, if it was used for rafi al-hadath, meaning you already did wudu with this water, and the water after being used, if a person was to come and use the same water a second time, here it does not have the attribute of being mutahhir, meaning it cannot be used the second time. It's called al-ma al-musta'mal. Al-ma al-musta'mal, it has conditions. The first condition which is mentioned here, that it be qalil, that it be a small amount of water. Small amount meaning it's less than qullatayn. The Prophet ﷺ said, إذا بلغ الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. Another riwayah, لم ينجس. If water reaches the amount of 2 qullah, then it does not become impure. So the mafhum of it, so what we understand from its mafhum is that if it's less than 2 qullatayn, if it's less than qullatayn, it can become impure. And the qullatayn, it is roughly around 190 liters. Water which is more than that, more than 190 liters, it can be used several times for wudu, several times for ghusl, and it doesn't become impure unless it changes in either its taste or its smell or its color, as will be mentioned inshallah when we speak about the najis. Water which is less than that, for example, if you have a bucket of water, if I was to use all of this water for ghusl, I was to pour it all over my head, then I was to collect the water again, second time, for example, collect it from the basin of the bath or whatever it may be. Can a second person now come and use the same water again? No, it cannot be used a second time. That's what it means to be al-ma' al-musta'mal. So it's important to realize it's the water which has been used, not the water which is remaining in the container. If I have a container of water and I used some of it and the rest is remaining, the remaining amount is not considered ma' al-musta'mal. That's still tahur. You can use it, someone else can use it, you can use it again, except in the case which I mentioned earlier, was if it's remaining from the usage of a woman, then a man cannot use it. But other than that, it's still tahur and it can be used. But the water which was actually used in the wudu or ghusl, meaning the one which runs off your body, that water cannot be used a second time. So that is one example of al-ma al-tahir, the one which removes, which doesn't remove hadath, nor does it remove al-najis. Likewise, it says, وَالطَّهُورُ الَّذِي تَغَيَّرَ كَثِيرٌ مِنْ لَوْنِهِ أَوْ طَعْمِهِ أَوْ رِيحِهِ بِطَاهِرٍ. Likewise, water which has changed in one of its qualities, in its taste, or its smell, or its color. If it has changed due to a pure substance, then that's when it becomes tahir. For example, tea. Tea is water, but it's water which has changed due to coming into contact with tea leaves. Here, it changed in its taste. Likewise, it changed in its color and its smell. So this water is no longer suitable for using in wudu or ghusl. You cannot make ghusl, nor can you make wudu using water which has changed in one of these properties. The condition being that if it's changed a lot, if it's changed a small amount, then it can still be used. If it's changed in a large amount, then it can no longer be used. So, for example, if you have water which hasn't changed except it's gone a bit darker in its color, there's only a small amount of changing, or it's got small, a hint of a smell. Here, you can still use it. It's still not tahur. But if it's changed a lot, then you can no longer use it. Now it's tahir. You can use it for other things, for drinking, for watering plants and things like that, but you cannot use it for removing the najasa, nor for removing al-hadith. And of course, this is all speak about if it changed due to a pure substance. If it changed due to an impure substance, that's going to be the third type, which is ma najis. So in summary, for al-ma al-tahir, the mu'allif mentioned two types. He mentioned water which has changed due to a pure substance in either its smell or its taste or its color, a significant amount, changed a significant amount. And he also mentioned al-ma al-yasir al-musta'mal fi rafi hadath, a small amount of water which was used for removing one's impurity. This ma musta'mal, used water, cannot be used a second time. A person asked if a small amount of ma musta'mal was to be mixed with water which is tahur, can it be used? There's tafsil regarding that, there's some detail regarding that in the method. They say if the amount of the ma musta'mal was to be a significant amount, a lot, so that if these two waters were to be mixed, it would change it. If we assume that there was to be a different color or smell or taste, then here you can't use it. Meaning, for example, if I have 1 liter of pure water, tahur, purifying water, and 1 liter of water which is tahir, which has either been used before or it's changed in one of its attributes. If I was to mix these two waters together, if it was to be the case that the results would be changed in its smell or taste or color, then you can't use any of it. If it was to be the case that the total amount altogether, it would not have changed in its smell, taste, or color, then you can use it. Of course, the ma musta'mal hasn't changed its taste or color in the first place, so how can it change the other water? Here you assume, you do iftirad. If it was to be the case that this ma musta'mal was to be a different color, would that affect the color of the ma tahur? If it's the case, then you can't use any of it after mixing it. Of course, that's the masala which is, and it's not even this level, that's like masala which is studied in al-muntaha bil-iqna. In any case, since one of you asked, I answered the question. It says, وَيَجُوزُ اسْتِعْمَالُهُ فِي غَيْرِهِمَا. The second type of water which we mentioned here, al-ma al-tahir, it's permissible to use in anything other than removing najasa and removing al-hadath, because it is something which is pure within itself, and the asl is that al-ashya al-tahira yajuzu isti'maluha, things which are pure, they're permissible to use, and things which are al-ashya al-najisa, al-asl annahu يحرم استعماله أو يكره استعماله. There's tafsir regarding that in the method. Things which are impure, they can either be haram to use or they can be makruh to use, but that's inshallah going to be mentioned when we come to the section that speaks about izalat and najasat. The third type of water says وَنَجِسٌ, water which is impure. وَهُوَ مَا تَغَيَّرَ بِنَجَاسَةٍ. Here now he's going to mention examples for water which is najis, impure. The first example is مَا تَغَيَّرَ بِنَجَاسَةٍ. If the water was to change in any of its three attributes, and its taste or smell or color, due to coming into contact with something which is impure. So for example, if you had water and then this water came in contact with urine, and that caused the color of the water to change, even if it changed a small amount, or it changed its smell, or it changed its taste. In this case, the whole water is now najis, is impure to use. Regardless of whether this water was a small amount, a large amount, it doesn't make any difference. Any water which has changed in its smell, taste, or color due to coming into contact with impure water or impure substances, then that water is also impure, najis, and it cannot be used for anything. That was the first example. أو لاقاها مورودا وهو قليل. The second case, which the Muallif mentioned here, is if the water comes into contact with najasa without changing, this can also make it impure with conditions. So it says, لاقاها مورودا وهو قليل. Two conditions being mentioned here. The first condition that it be a small amount, يعني دون قلتين, less than 2 قلة. If it's less than قلتين, meaning less than 190 liters, this water becomes impure by coming into contact with najasa, even if it doesn't change. So let's say I have a bucket of water. This bucket of water is like 20 liters. If a drop of blood was to fall into that water, the whole water would become impure, najis, and it's not permissible to use, even if it hasn't changed any of its attributes. So that was the first condition, that it be less than قلتين, less than 190 or 195 liters. The second condition is that it be mawrud, la waridan. This is explained or this is mentioned in the books of madhab through a different wording, which they say في غير محل التطهير, meaning that this only applies if it's the water, if the impure substance is falling on the water, not the opposite. Meaning, if I have like a container of water and an impure substance falls in it, here the water is mawrud, meaning it's happening to it. The whole water becomes impure. But if it was to be the opposite, meaning there's some impurity on the ground, some blood on the ground, I want to wash off this impurity. Here I would pour water on it. Does the same thing apply here? If I pour water on it, does the water straight away become najis after coming into contact with it? If that was the case, then you would never be able to purify anything. So no, if the water is the one which is warid, meaning it's being poured on the impurity, then here it doesn't become impure by merely coming into contact with it. But if it's the case that the impurity is falling on the water, then here, as soon as it makes contact, the water is impure. I hope that's clear, inshallah. So this is explained in madhab as being في غير محل التطهير, because the opposite, when the water is being poured on something, here this is في محل التطهير, meaning the water is being used in a place for the purpose of purification, of removing najasat. Here, the water, as long as it's in that place where it's removing the najasa, it takes the ruling of being tahur. It only becomes najis after it's separated from the impurity. When it falls off and it separates from the impurity, now that water is najis. But whilst it's not separated from the najasa, it doesn't change in its ruling. So this would apply, for example, if you're asking, let's say you're washing your clothes, these clothes have najas on it, and you're pouring water on it. Is the water now impure as well? It becomes impure once it falls off the clothes, once it separates from it. If you rinse out the clothes, the water which just came out is najis. But before it comes out, it is still tahur. Okay, so that was the third type of water. It says, وَلَا يَجُوزُ اسْتِعْمَالُهُ مُطْلَقًا إِلَّا لِضَرُورَةٍ. And it's not permissible to use this third type of water, al-ma' al-najis, unrestrictedly. Meaning you can't use it for wudu or ghusl, for raf al-hadath. You can't use it also for izalat al-najis, removing najasat. You also can't use it for drinking. You can't use it for example, watering plants and things like that. You can't use it in any case. It's haram to use unrestrictedly, except for al-darura. It's only permissible to use in the case of a necessity, like al-atash. If a person was to be dying of thirst and the only thing they have is impure water, Ma najis, then here they can drink it due to necessity. Likewise, for example, ifa'u hariq, to put out a fire. If there's a fire and you need to put it out, the only water you have is impure water, you can use it here, and that is permissible. So those are the three types of water. Then it says, وَالْمَاءُ الْكَثِيرُ قُلَّتَانْ فَصَاعِدًا. This masala I already mentioned. Water which is kathir, a large amount, it is that water which has reached qullatayn, meaning 195 liters, roughly, or 191.25 as the muallif mentions here, or more. Anything which is above this amount, it is ma kathir, it's a lot of water. Anything which is less than that is considered a small amount of water. And these are uh, rough estimates, as is mentioned in the method, تقريبا لا تحديدا, meaning it doesn't make a difference if it's 186, 187. يعني it's close enough to 190, so it's considered الماء الكثير. And it says والقلتان 191.25 لتر وكيلا. It is 191.25 liters. Now, some other masail which relate to al-miyah, or one thing which I mentioned it, but I'll just mention it again. So water which is kathir, a large amount, its ruling doesn't change unless its attributes change. Meaning, it doesn't become najis by coming into contact with najasa unless its color or smell or taste change. Likewise, it doesn't become tahir after being used. So if a person was to, for example, make wudu in a river or in a pool, swimming pool, which has a lot of water, hundreds of liters of water. Here, does the whole water become najis? Or sorry, does the whole water become musta'mal, tahir, ghayr mutahhir? No, the water remains tahur. It can still be used for purification a second and third time because it's a lot. But if it was a small amount, if the person was to make wudu in a bath of water, and this bath has, let's say, 100 liters. Here, as soon as they've made wudu with it, the whole water is now tahir. It cannot be used a second time. And in the madhab, there's no farq, لا فرق بين الجاري والراكد. Here, the madhab only considers the amount of water, if it's a small amount or a large amount. It doesn't consider whether the water is rakid, meaning it's staying still, or it's jari, or it's flowing. Some other madhab, they differentiate. They say الماء الجاري لا ينجس والماء الراكد ينجس. That water which is flowing, it doesn't become impure by coming into contact with the najasa. But in the madhab, no, there's no difference between al-ma' al-jari, water which is flowing, and water which is staying still. Now, the next section, which speaks about al-aniya, the containers in which a person makes wudu. This also relates to tahara, because when you're doing tahara, you've got water, so we need to know the ruling of the water, and you've got the container from which you're using that water, so we need to know the ruling of that container, whether it's permissible to use or not. That's the reason why it's usually mentioned in this section. So there's فصل in this section. كل إناء طاهر يباح اتخاذه واستعماله. Every container which is made of something pure, it is يباح اتخاذه واستعماله. It's permissible to own, and it's permissible to use. So we understand from here a couple of conditions. إناء طاهر, a container which is made of pure material, a pure substance. Like, for example, a container made of metal, container made of plastic, so on. Metal is tahir, plastic is tahir, so that water can be used. That container can be used. There's no issue in using it. But a container which is made of, for example, jild al-mayta, made from the skin of a dead animal. Jild al-mayta, according to the madhab, najis, ولا يطهر بالدماء. It's impure, even if it's been tanned. So therefore, using that container is not permissible. Likewise, if it was to be made from, for example, one of the things mentioned in the method was to be made from min a'dha'i al-adami, was to be made from human bones or human skin and things like that. Even though human bones and skins are permissible, so tahir in the method, it's not permissible to use such containers. So that's the first condition, the ID tahir. The second condition is um, what he says after that, إلا إذا كان ذهبا أو فضة أو فيه شيء منهما, except if it is made of gold or silver, or it has some gold or silver in it. So that's the second condition, that it not be made of gold or silver, and likewise, as the Madhab also mentioned, not be made of human body parts. Here, because the Prophet forbade that. It says if there's any gold or silver in it, meaning it doesn't have to be the case the whole container is made of gold or silver. Even if it's مموه به أو مطلي أو مطعم, there's different examples given. If it's for example got parts of it which are gold or silver, or if it's what's the word for it, when the inside of it is like a different material, but on the outside they put gold or silver, things like that. They're also not permissible to use. The Prophet forbade that. He said, من أكل أو شرب من إناء ذهب أو فضة فكأنه يجرجر نارا في جهنم, كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Person who eats or drinks from gold or silver containers, then it's like they are basically like consuming or swallowing fire in Jahannam. There's an exception to this in the method. It says إلا ضبة يسيرة من فضة لحاجة. The only exception to this is that it's permissible to use a container which has a small amount of silver in it used to fix it. So if there was to be a crack in a container, in a bowl or a pot or something like that, and then that crack was to be filled with a piece of silver. Here this is permissible because the Prophet did so. He had a container فيه سلسلة من فضة. It had a piece of silver in it, which was ضبة, meaning used to fix it, used to fix the container. Here that's permissible, but that's only for small amounts of silver being used in it, and it's only used due to a need, meaning to fix the container. It's not used, for decoration or for any other purpose. And it can only be from silver, not gold. If there's any gold, then that's unrestrictedly haram. Now, what does it mean when it says يباح اتخاذه واستعماله? It's permissible to take it, to have it, and to also use it. So اتخاذ, it means it has two meanings. It can mean التصنيع, to make the container. For example, I have a piece of plastic or a piece of aluminium or any other metal. I can use that material to make to make a container, and that's permissible. If I had a piece of gold, can I use that gold to make a container? No, I cannot use it. That's the first meaning. The second meaning is also a tamalluk, to own it. So, for example, to buy this container, to buy or sell it. It's not permissible to buy nor to sell any any container, glass or plate or anything else which is made of gold or silver. And as for isti'mal, it is, to use it, whether that's using for wudu, using it for eating, drinking, for example, also spoons and forks and things like that. They are not permissible to use. They're made of gold or silver. And there's no difference here between it being used by a female or a male. So, for example, females are allowed to own forms of jewelry from gold or silver, whereas for men, gold is not permissible except in a few exceptions. But despite of that, a woman cannot use a gold plate or a gold cup, just as how a male cannot use it either. And does this affect the validity of the tahara? No, it does not affect the validity of the tahara. So, for example, if a person was to make wudu using a gold or silver container, the wudu here is still valid, even though the container is haram. to own or to use. So they're sinful for using this container, but the actual wudu itself is valid. As opposed to what we mentioned earlier regarding the water. If a person was to make wudu using haram water, here the wudu is itself not valid. So that is this section. Perhaps inshallah we'll stop here. And the next section relating to istinja, we'll take that in the upcoming lesson. Wallahu alam, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. If there's any questions, then feel free to ask. Person asks, if you don't mind, can I slow down the speech? Sorry about that. I didn't see the message yet. The lesson is inshallah going to be recorded. So you can go back to it after. Any questions?
I think there's one question. Okay, so brother asked, if someone were to use a little amount of the ma' al-musta'mal and mix it with tahur water, would that be permissible to use?
Yeah, I answered that question during the lesson.
Okay.
I said that if the ma musta'mal is to be a lot, then it's not permissible even if you mix them together. If it was to be a small amount, then it's permissible. Obviously, there were more details that I mentioned, like you would assume if this ma musta'mal was to be a different color, would it affect its color and so on. But that's just the generic principle. If it was to be mixed with a lot of ma musta'mal, then no. If it was to be mixed with a small amount, then it is fine. Musta'mal means used water. Used as in used for tahara, used for ghusl or wudu, or likewise water which was used for removing najasat, removing impurities. Obviously, water which is used for removing impurities, if it actually comes in contact with the impurity, then here this is najis. But they say al-munfasil عن محل عن حكم النجاسة والمنفصل عن محل حكم النجاسة. That's a specific case where it removes the ruling of the impurity without actually coming into contact with it after having to wash. That water is tahir and it's not najis, but it's not tahur either. It cannot be used for wudu ghusl. Now, obviously, this whole method is supposed to be very summarized. It doesn't go into much detail because it's supposed to be for a beginner. So some of these masail, there are other tafasil, more details than certain time. In certain cases, there might be conditions or exceptions to the rule, which I'll mention here. But the goal here is to just understand the masala on a basic level, and then you can build on that for for later levels.
I'm not sure if this question was brought up, but somebody asked, when does the ma' become musta'mal? Is it when it was used for any purification, such as washing the hands, or is it only for when it was used for wudu or ghusl?
What ما مستعمل is used for?
Yeah, so when does the water become used essentially? When does it become ma'
It's only if
al-musta'mal?
it's used for رفع الحدث or إزالة النجس. It's only water which is used for purification, meaning used for wudu or used for ghusl or used for removing najasat. Water used for example, uh, for other things, like if you just have a bath with the water, but you're not intending to do رفع الحدث, here that water is still طهور, it doesn't change its ruling. In fact, they say المستعمل لتجديد الوضوء, that water is still طهور, it's makruh to use. المستعمل في طهارة المستحبة. For example, if you're already in a state of wudu, but then you go and make wudu a second time, here that water doesn't become مستعمل. It's still permissible to use, but it's makruh, it's disliked. Likewise, if you were to use it for ghusl al-jum'ah, ghusl al-jum'ah is mustahab, recommended, it's not obligatory. So the water used in ghusl al-jum'ah, it doesn't remove hadith. Therefore, it's still طهور. It's only مستعمل غير مطهر if it was used for removing a najasa or removing hadith. Is that clear,
Jazakallahu
inshallah?
khair. Any other questions by anyone?
Yeah. Um, Okay, I'm guessing that's it then.
I think that's it. Yeah. جزاك الله خير
Okay,
for the lesson.
جزاكم الله خير. وإياكم. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Inshallah, I'll try getting that fixed for next time.
No worries, inshallah. So the next lesson will be the same time
Yeah,
this next week, inshallah.
yeah, yeah. Sounds good, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay, I'll be going then. Um, وفيكم بارك الله. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.